Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Elijah Lee. He is an activist here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, based in the Richmond area, and he has got so much experience in the 4 years since the age of 10 when he started about starting a nonprofit. His nonprofit is Hear Our Voices. He has participated in conferences, he's been invited to speak, he has organized rallies and marches. He is a dynamo when it comes to identifying problems that need to be solved and putting his entire focus on solving them. In addition to being 14 years old, he's about to start his freshman year at Maggie L. Walker Governor School for Government and International Studies, which makes me very happy. And he's here today to talk with us about his legislative agenda for 2023. So, welcome, Elijah Lee.
Thank you for having me.
So the last time we spoke, which was unbelievably in December of 2020, I can hardly believe it was that long ago, you were getting ready to join the 2022 Advocacy Cohort for Voices of Virginia's Children. At that point, you hadn't started. And so you were like, circle back around and ask me later what this is all about. So I'm circling back around to have you explain what that program was, what your experience was, and how it brought you to drafting 15 bills.
Absolutely. So thank you for this opportunity to speak on this. This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, as I'm sure you're going to tell very soon. So Voices for Virginia's Children is a phenomenal organization that is simply dedicated to making sure that every single young person can be represented in all the elements of advocacy in Virginia. And I worked with them previously. And so one day we get an email from our contact there saying, hi, we would love for you to be a part of this advocacy cohort with legislation. At that time, I didn't know the first thing about legislation, quite frankly. I'm used to social and community work. Never have I really hit that systemic and institutionalized part of my advocacy yet. And so I signed up for it and I said, worst case scenario, I don't like it. And that could not have been further from the truth. And I truly, truly loved it. So what that looked like is that we were all able to go to this cohort. And unfortunately, it was virtual due to the pandemic. And you had, I want to say, anywhere from 30 to 40 kids. That number could be a little bit wrong, but that's what I kind of saw. And we were separated by things that we were all passionate about. And so I was specifically passionate about making sure that our children were taken care of in regards to child abuse, neglect, things that I had previously worked on in the past. And I remember being in a group of about 6 to 5 kids where many of them were all passionate about the same things. And that was simply our young people and making sure that we're all passionate about things like mental health. And so from that moment, we had an opportunity to really talk with legislators, advocate for bills, advocate for legislation that we felt was representing the issues that we were concerned about. And I think having this opportunity as a young person really was something that I was honored to be a part of. And I felt like it opened a million doors all at the same time for me. And so coming from that, I couldn't let it go. I'm going to be very honest, is that we're in the middle of session and I still see an opportunity to get more and more involved. And so I called the contact from the cohort and I said, hey, would you be okay and down with me going down to the General Assembly and advocating for these bills? And she was 110% for it. And so we went together. And that was really nice to kind of have that support going into a very intimidating field. And I remember having the first meeting of the day with Delegate Coiner. And that was something that just switched in my mind. And I think from there, the rest is kind of history.
Well, it is phenomenal, and I'll tell you, one of the thoughts I had is that there's a page program, and so my stepson Matt was a page when he was like 14. And every year the pages come and they serve in the Senate and in the House, and a lot of children of legislators end up being pages, and it's a great experience. Everybody says it's just one of the greatest experiences, but where you're coming from is a wholly different way of looking at government. It's not literally sitting on the sidelines and observing how bills are made. You're coming at it from, let's see how bills are made, and how, again, voices that have not been heard can be part of crafting better legislation. That is fascinating to me that this is happening in 2022.
Absolutely. And so I think that after really advocating for these types of bills and I'm really just taking a moment to recognize them, of course, there were things that I wanted to pass that didn't. And of course, there were things that passed that I loved. And so really taking in those wins. But from there, I also recognize that now that I've had an opportunity to advocate for these bills, I now kind of understand the process. And so let's take that knowledge and let's put it into action. And so I think really starting in July, I started reaching out to legislators and setting up preliminary meetings. And in these meetings, I propose my own sense of legislation. And so I've come up with about 15 legislative ideas that I'm proposing to legislators over the time. Hopefully, some of them will get drafted. I'm definitely hoping so. And if so, I'm prepared and already working on building a coalition and community of young people, young advocates that can advocate for these bills, help push these bills, because these are not just my ideas. I was able to come from the General Assembly and spread that knowledge and joy and learning about legislation and give it to fellow young people, which was something that I greatly, greatly appreciated.
So you said that some things didn't pass, and I can tell you, I've been doing legislative advocacy for a long time. And up here in Northern Virginia, John Horsch of SALT, Social Action Linking Together, has been doing it since 1983.
Wow.
And he's still working on legislation like a fully refunded earned income tax credit. And he's been working on it since 1983. So it helps to have patience and to understand that there's incrementalism in a lot of these bills that require years of work. But of the things that passed, you said you were very overjoyed about things that passed. What were some of the things you were most excited about?
Absolutely. So something that I was really excited about was a human trafficking bill that was passed. I believe it was HB 258. That definitely tells you how big of a legislative nerd I was, and my mom can definitely echo that. And so this was a human trafficking bill that had that training and human trafficking specific training for hotel staff, right? And so we recognize that human trafficking is a growing problem in Virginia, and especially being right on Highway 95, it is a massive problem, especially for Virginia. And so I think having this type of legislation that was representative of young people was something that was definitely really, really inspiring for me. And I think even to be a part of that and being able to like lobby for it and advocate for it, I think helping myself be a part of that solution was something that I greatly appreciated as well.
No, I agree with that. My daughter worked at a hotel in Richmond and at one point thought that there was a case of human trafficking right in front of her face and was unprepared, untrained, and without resources to know even what to do about it. So I agree with you. That is such important legislation, and it needs to become the norm that restaurant workers, hotel workers, truck stop workers, people in gas stations need to recognize when they think there might be a case of human trafficking right in front of them and what to do about it, which is the key. So, what are some of the ones you're looking forward to? So, I know you've got all kinds of conversations lined up with legislators. So, what are the ones you have the most hope for this session?
Absolutely. So I'm taking a moment to look down at them right now because I cannot just take my eyes off of them for 1 second. I'm definitely looking to expand human trafficking training for medical professionals. I'm still kind of working through that and how we can kind of cling through that. But I think this is type of training that could be rather short and sweet, but definitely extremely beneficial and helpful to those that are in the medical field. Another one that I'm definitely looking at is when we recognize things like peer recovery specialists and things like that. And so I'm definitely trying to get in that area of substance use disorder and looking at ways that we can definitely support those types of people. Another one that I'm always paying attention to is the Vote 16 bill. This is a bill that will lower the age in local elections to 16. This is something that extends my advocacy. And so I've definitely been really following it closely. And so that may be something that I'm looking forward to in the upcoming years. And then there's also simple things like I definitely think it's time that we codify things like Griswold v. Connecticut in light of recent overturnings of the Supreme Court. And I think right now we really want to protect civil liberties. It starts with codifying already proposed bills and legislation.
Oh, you're so right. I just did a show with Dale Brumfield about the abolition of the death penalty here in Virginia. We're the first Southern state that did that in March of 2021, which was a high mark for me because I've worked with VADP for a long time. But it's not really codified until it's in the Constitution. And there is, as I'm sure you have been learning, it's quite a long process. It has to pass, there has to be an election, it has to pass exactly the same way. Then it goes as a referendum to the voters, and that's how the nonpartisan redistricting amendment got added to our Constitution. It is not a quick thing, and it's hard to keep your group together, and it's hard to keep your message together for things like that. But I agree with you that codifying protections for women's reproductive health choices in Virginia is incredibly important because with any election, every 4 years when we get a new governor, what we thought was settled law is just not settled law. So so who have you spoken with who kind of on board with some of these ideas of yours?
So I think that was really the beautiful part. I went into this thinking I had to be extremely calculative, extremely meticulous about, putting in this type of legislation for this type of legislator. However, I started off by simply proposing really all of this to these people. And I think that hearing such positive feedback was something that's really been able to kind of lift my spirits. I've had a privilege of talking from senators and delegates across aisles. And so even recognizing that these people, of course, are more supportive of some pieces of legislation than others, which is, natural based on interest in committee and aisle. I recognize that. But I think a message that I really want to focus on and send to every single young person is that no matter who these people are, they've been extremely supportive of young people becoming more involved in this thing. They've been extremely supportive of young people proposing and writing and helping draft legislation. So to any young person out there that feels intimidated by this process, feels scared, feels a little, apprehensive because it's such a big thing, I ask that you just give it a try, give it your best shot, and know that you have some phenomenal legislators that are here to watch you grow. And you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. I'm having to edit bills every day because they're not perfect. And they're not going to be perfect. But I think it's just a sign to every young person that don't ever be afraid to get involved in the systems that serve you.
And that's such a great message coming from a young person that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a learning experience. And we don't learn from things we already know how to do well. We learn from things that we don't know how to do. And we make mistakes and then we learn how to do them better. But the point is you have to get started and you have to try. And I do think that we give our power away when we don't think we have any. And I think sometimes young people are like, but I don't have any power. And it's like, yes, you do. You have your voice. And no one has exemplified that more than you have, Elijah. Your whole mantra is hear our voices. And it's not just on your own behalf, it's for all the other people, young people, and people who are interested in your issues that you're like, hear our voices. So this is another way of building community too. And my hat is off to you for you are so good at reaching out and bringing people in. I mean, that's how I met you through Facebook. You like reached out and brought me in, and now I'm a fan, and I'm like, I'm all about whatever Elijah's doing. So we're going to go to a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear a little bit more from Elijah about some of the bills he would like to see passed in the 2023 legislative session.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill, bring good home.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
Maria, so how's work?
It was fourth period biology. Our students just weren't getting how easily viruses spread. So Miss Bell and I had them role play a zombie virus outbreak. By the time they had all learned the lesson, all the living were dead. Hey, how's your job going?
That big sales meeting I planned? Next year, I might get to go.
Cool.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Elijah Lee. He is a remarkable young man about to start his freshman year at Maggie L. Walker Governor's School for Government and International Studies down in Richmond. But his summer has been super busy, as was his previous year when he got involved in working with the General Assembly here in Virginia as part of a program that introduced young people to how legislation is made. So, learning that lesson very well, Elijah has drafted 15 bills that he hopes will get some air in the General Assembly next year. And I want him to lead us through some of the bills he has hope for and some of the things he would like to see happen. I am intrigued by your voting at 16 bill. After all, you can get a driver's license at 16. So, is that kind of what you tied that to?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be very honest. This is not really my bill. This has been a bill that young people have been pushing for a long time in Virginia. And so I consider myself as one more person joining the fight, picking up the torch for this bill. But yeah, absolutely. I think that when we look at local elections specifically, we really want to get young people involved in that voting process. And we really want to make sure that young people have the voice that they need to become the future leaders of Virginia. So I think having that will kind of give them that voice. Another bill that I was definitely hoping would make its air in the General Assembly was the ban on microplastics. And so I'm very new to the area of climate change. And so I was able to work with other young people that are really passionate about something like this. And in my research, I found that, we inhale 70,000 particles of plastic on the daily. And millions of people die every year from microplastics in their lungs. And so the second I heard many of these statistics, I was hooked, right? And so I recognize the climate change movement is very new. I recognize that a lot of the problems that we may really begin to recognize is new. The problems themselves are very old, but recognizing them is very new. And so I'm hoping that something like a ban on microplastics will be the thing that seals the deal, right? And really making Virginia a leader in this type of movement.
That's interesting to me, first of all, because we just had a vote here in Fairfax City on a 5-cent plastic bag tax, which was not a unanimous vote, oddly enough, because it's about changing behavior, right? Tax plastic bags, people will start to look for alternatives, and then we can just eliminate them altogether. But when you say microplastics, what does that include? What would that ban include?
Absolutely. So we're still working through a lot of the logistics of it, but microplastics are one of those things that we don't see every day, right? Microplastics are in our toothpaste, microplastics in our lotion, microplastics in our ocean. So therefore it's getting in our fish, which is getting into our bodies. We found microplastics in bloodstreams before. Microplastics are quite literally everywhere. And so really focusing this type of ban would be something that's kind of difficult to do. So I'm still waiting the weeds on that and working with legislators to do so. But again, microplastics are quite literally everywhere. It's in our hand sanitizers. And so I recognize that your faces may be shocked, as are mine. But I think this bill is something that can be extremely useful. And not only for our environment and not only for our earth, but unfortunately, humans only seem to care about something when it begins to hurt humans. And so now this is a wake-up call. It's hurting humans. And so I think that's why this ban is more necessary than ever.
Wow. Well, stay tuned because I want to hear more on that. I'll be looking for that legislation this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another bill that I was really trying to look at was the human trafficking bill. This was something that would bring in human trafficking training for medical professionals. And so I think that this is, again, something I'm really trying to work through. I'm talking with numerous medical professionals, really trying to understand the ways that I can best support this. And crafting this legislation, I want it to be something that is beneficial and helping people instead of burdening people with more training and more things and just more work to do. So I'm really still trying to understand this entire process as a whole. But I think this is something that could be really beneficial, targeting our EORs along with our clinics. And this is just an effort to make sure that we're really working hard to keep our young people safe, because that's more important than ever. And then another bill/resolution that I'm really beginning to look at is kind of a resolution that would bring diversity into our classrooms. And so I recognize that this session we could be playing a lot of political football. However, one thing that I don't believe politics should be involved in is the prosperity of our young people. And so in recognizing things like redlining, recognizing things like that blatant discrimination in places, we also know that our classrooms begin to look a lot alike each other, right? And oftentimes being the only kid of color in a class of 20 kids, that can be awkward, especially when specific topics come up in class. And so understanding things like that, I really think is important to continue to bring diversity into the classroom. And so I'm currently working on resolutions and pieces of legislation that would also do that. But I will be sure to keep you all posted as things hopefully get drafted and maybe even get passed.
So, did you read the Richmond Times-Dispatch series on Maggie L. Walker Governor School? Because it definitely supports exactly what you just said. It was a fascinating series to me. I thought the paper did a wonderful job in talking about the genesis of the school, which started under Governor Tim Kaine. I think one of his children went there. And the fact that he was not aware that there was almost no diversity in that school since it was founded. Like, it was like, aha, look, we started a governor's school and it didn't quite work the way we imagined. How do you feel about that, starting as a freshman there?
I think that I'm very excited to be able to start as a freshman at Maggie L. Walker Governor School. We recognize that being in the capital of Confederacy, there's a lot that we have to unpack. We're going to be very honest. There's a lot of problems that is riddled throughout every single system. And so we recognize the problems that Maggie L. Walker previously had in regards to diversity. And however, I think that's something that's really, really commendable and something that I'm personally choosing to focus on is our willingness to fix it. Right? We recognize that ignorance is one thing. Blatant and specific discrimination and hate is another thing. We can handle ignorance. We can overcome ignorance. We can teach ignorance. We cannot overcome hate and blatant discrimination. That is something that takes a little bit more than simple education. And so I think that Maggie L. Walker Governor School is doing a phenomenal job in working to reprimand and really working to overcome previous mistakes. Which I can definitely say is better than what probably people may have expected. And so we recognize their history, but I personally, simply because they're willing to fix it, I am proud to call myself a future dragon. And that's something that I see rather commendable.
It is, and I think the location of the Maggie L. Walker School is in a very historic neighborhood in Richmond as well, and it used to be a regular high school, and for African Americans in Richmond, and there are still people alive who remember going there because they interviewed these folks for the series they did in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. So it was my first introduction to the school, and like you, I thought the principal there was very open. I said, I think he is committed to doing what needs to be done. I think they've got the right attitude and the right culture there. So I was pleased, just so elated actually that you're going there. And the fact that it's for government and international studies, because government seems to be the direction you're heading in.
Absolutely. And I think that was definitely a pro to the school. I'm really excited to be able to learn more on a systemic and educational side instead of always just jumping headfirst into what feels like the deep end at times.
So what are some of the other bills out of 15? Are there any long shots in there, Elijah? Ones that you're just a Hail Mary? I hope maybe it'll stick somewhere and we'll get to it sometime.
Yeah. So a couple of the ones that I actually mentioned were a couple of Hail Marys, right? This Vote 16 bill has been in and out of the General Assembly. So I'm hoping that maybe this is our year, right? This is the year we get this thing through. But it's a bit of a hard thing, right? There's a possibility that this doesn't happen. However, again, we talked previously about incrementalization, right? And really taking this piece by piece by piece. And I think that this is going to be one more chip at a very large rock, it feels like. But, one more chip can oftentimes get the boulder rolling. Another one is going to be the diversity piece. We recognize that diversity and things like the word equity have been a dirty word previously in sessions within this current political state. However, I have a lot of faith in our legislators, and I have faith that once we really begin to recognize our education system and how this could be incredibly beneficial to young people, that is going to be what matters. And so I'm holding out hope that our legislators are going to pull through, not for this political football and not for hate for one another, not for this arguing across the aisle, but simply with our young people in mind. And I think that will have a lot of power to it. And I think it will send a very bold message to Virginians everywhere.
So I will mention that I did a show with two young political leaders, Matthew Savage, and I can't remember the other young man's name. when they got a bill passed that allowed for 1 day of excused absence for middle and high school students to participate in civic engagement. I did a show with both of them, and it was bipartisan, leader of the Young Republicans, leader of the Young Democrats. And so, how are you going to use your 1 day? Do you just get 1 day?
Absolutely. So I have talked to Matthew Savage a couple of times on this. So he previously oversaw the organization that I currently serve as president over. So we've had numerous conversations, all of them very much thanking him for the work that he has done in that regards. However, I do plan to use my day to go to the General Assembly and lobby for not only some of the bills that I plan to hopefully get drafted, but also for some of the bills. I do recognize that we are going to be on the defense for some legislation. Women's reproductive rights are up, and I recognize that, right? And I say that not as a man, but I say that as a brother to a wonderful, wonderful sister. I take time to recognize that it is really hard for me to simply look at her and notice that we do not have the same rights. And I have more rights simply because I'm a different gender than you. And so that's while I'll be advocating against those types of bills. And so I understand that they're going to come. I understand that we're going to have to go in defense. But I also understand that when there is work to be done, I am more than happy to play a part in doing it. And so I will definitely be using my lobbying day.
Well, I'll tell you this, you are one of the most self-aware people I've ever met. And not only that, but you're very articulate in expressing how your ideas can be made into action steps and where the power comes from. And the power comes from finding your community, telling people what it is you're trying to do, who you're trying to do it for, who you're trying to do it with, and why it matters. And you excel at that. I guess that is just the gift that you were given. But my goodness, you have done so much with that gift, Elijah. And I can't thank you enough for being on Your Need to Know. I hope that you'll allow me to circle back around with you after session, maybe on your spring break, although I'm sure you'll be somewhere else on your spring break, probably speaking at a conference. But I do want to circle back around and find out from you what happened during session in 2023. I want to wish you a great start to your freshman year at Maggie L. Walker Governor's School. I can't wait to hear about that experience too. And for you at home, this is what you need to know about what young people are doing, what young people are capable of, and the power that young people have to change the future in partnership with some of us who are boomers. So this is what you need to know. Stay tuned for the 2023 legislative session here in Virginia.